Ethan, how are you?
Good. How are
I
you?
am doing fantastic. I weathered my show choir hangover pretty well yesterday,
I,
so I'm proud of
I was gonna
myself.
say you got to be tired. You got to be
I,
tired.
I did the math, and I walked into Holmen at roughly 7:30 uh, on Saturday morning, and I got out of there actually at 11:30 on Sunday night. And I'll give Holmen and all the people running that company a lot of credit because you look and it's like 21 groups on Saturday. No one expected that competition to run on time. I think we ended prelims maybe 15 minutes behind schedule, and we did finals, I think only 15 or 20 minutes behind schedule too. So it was a well-run comp, and so I appreciate that. And so that helped my hangover not be too terrible
Also,
yesterday.
so one question before we start: what are seagulls, and how did they
Oh,
get?
yeah, yeah. So one of the groups there, Toma Limited Edition, they're doing a show about Popeye the Sailor this year.
Okay.
And so I guess what their thing is for competition here is that they all dress as seagulls. And so, like the people I was sitting by during the morning, they showed up. They're like, is that a group of penguins in the bleachers? Is that a group of like polar bears? Like, what is it? And so eventually someone figured it out that they were seagulls. But, I had plenty of people come up to me at the competition on
Mhm.
Saturday and be like, oh, hey, like you're the Instagram guy, right? And I'm like, yeah, meet you. Yeah, no, the Toma people, they just took photos of me from afar. So I think,
Celebrity. You're a celebrity.
yeah, I know. Ugh. You can say hi to me if anybody from Toma's watching. I'm not that intimidating. I'll see you at New London. So
All right, ready to get
yeah,
started? Nathan, how are
yeah.
you?
Yep. I'm doing well. We still haven't got to Indiana Show Choir, but we got our first taste this past week, and it was nice. It's a little bit of a appetizer in a sense for
For
our
sure.
rest of the season.
For sure.
We did get 2 live streams. I was worried we were going to get none. So,
Same. I was too. I'm glad there were some out there.
Yeah. And we do have Indiana Show Choir coming up this weekend, though. I don't know if we're going to get that within this 1 hour spot, but hopefully we will touch on a number of other things. Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of Show Choir Nation. This is the premier podcast of Homeroom Show Choir and the HRSC Media Network. If you watched our last episode, that's fantastic. If you didn't, that's fine. All of the episodes, including the last one, all future ones, will also be available on Spotify, YouTube as well. So if you can't catch it live or rather not watch it, Instagram's media player, you can find us, just search Homeroom Show Choir on either Spotify or YouTube. All right, we are going to start off some competition recaps. We're just going to get straight away into things here. And I was at Holmen. We'll get to that in a second. Nathan and Ethan here were glued to their computers watching live. And so one of the competitions with the live was the Ankeny Centennial Mid-Iowa Show Choir Championships. The result in this one, Linn-Mar 10th edition taking home the grand championship, as well as all three captions, and Riley Nelson taking home Best Soloist Award as well. In second place, Waukee Northwest EOS, and they took home a Best Performer Award, Valu. In third place, La Crosse Central Grand Central Station, who took home the People's Choice Award, Soloist Award with Nakia Chindana. In fourth place, Falls Jefferson Legacy, and then the prep groups that made finals in fifth place, Linn-Mar Instep, and in sixth place, Waukee Northwest Aurora. We're going to start at the top here. I didn't see these shows, but Nathan, you, I think, have many wheels in your brain turning about Linn-Mar.
yes.
Talk about Linn-Mar for a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm. I will. So, Linn-Mar coming from um, Cedar Rapids over to Des Moines for this competition, the Des Moines metro area, and they showed out. They had a amazing show. What I gathered from the live stream is it's about a town in Cedar. Their theme is about a town in Cedar City, and it's a moon expedition. Just some. I cannot find if it's a real or a fictitious town. Do you know, Ethan?
Well, from what I understand, is it's their own play on the Goodnight Moon Child's book.
Mm.
I haven't read that book in probably forever, so I do not remember if it was Cedar City is actually in it. But anyways, they killed the whole theme in general.
Yeah, it was a crazy theme, and I think expanding from a actual either one that's in fiction or in real life and turning it into your own thing, they did an incredible job of that, and I think that's a huge part of why the show did so good. Uh, it was about a small American town in the 50s receiving a pitch about a grand moon expedition, and they're a little skeptical about going to the moon. And I really think they killed it with the costumes. They had a lot more, like it felt like you were in the 50s, and this guy was actually coming in and trying to convince them. But also just overall impressions of Linn-Mar is that only 15 to 20 groups, I can say, each year have a show that meets the same caliber year over year over year, and Linn-Mar is one of those groups. And they're really good at storytelling, like I said. Everything from costuming to facials brings me into this world that they have generated with their theme. I will get to Golden Hour in a second. I see that in the chat. It was very clean. It is incredibly clean for a show that is at the beginning of January 6th, and like everything's so clean. Every choreo wise, lots of ripples, look really good. Especially, I think they're a group of over 60 plus. I think they do have swings, but that also complicates things when you have even more people than just like 50 to 55. Those extra 5 people, making sure everyone's on top of it. And now to those special effects, to Golden Hour, which I think will be probably the most talked about part of Linn-Mar. And I strongly suggest that you look at that. It's an onstage blackout moment that is very bold for any group to do. You might see a few each state even dare to basically have an onstage blackout, and the performers have some sort of lighting show. And this one reminds me of Burbank's iconic 2012 Prodigal show. It's a completely different one because they kind of have spotlights in their hands versus their whole suits are lit up in Burbank's show, but it kind of gave me the similar vibe. And I think Golden Hour was the perfect pick for that. The whole song is talking about light, so basically matching the song's lyrics to the actual show itself, and it basically gave off to the final climax moment, climbing the steps toward the center with the lights. This basically the staircase of the two performers up to that top is such a beautifully blocked section. They better be getting 10s in the blocking section. Everything's such well blocked. And that was really perfect. And I think it does show why I think we'll see a lot of Golden Hour either as a ballad. That wasn't even the ballad. Either as a ballad this year or just incorporate it into a lot of shows. It's a really good show choir song. What do you think about Linn-Mar, Ethan?
Well, I'm in awe. It's probably gonna be the best show I see this season. That's way too early to say that. It's way too early to say that. But watching it, I was just in awe. I do have some little tad bits I want to go over. But one thing that I have to say is, if you want to know how good the show is or how people perceive Linn-Mar, I think might be 2 YouTube videos out right now, and they already have 2,000 views in a day and a half. That just speaks for a whole where Linn-Mar is right now. But to go over some notes, I was in love with the second number and the third number.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know. Now this is probably my fault. Before this, I knew Linn-Mar, I'd watched Linn-Mar, but I never really dug deep into Linn-Mar. I never knew Linn-Mar could sit in a pocket like that and do choreo the way that they did. There was a ripple they did. And shout out to the choreographers. I know April James is in there, Lexi Robinson, or Robson. Sorry if I get that wrong. And maybe Braxton Carr is in there as well. Yeah, but there was a ripple. And it was where you had a group of people following the protagonist in the ripple, igniting the whole ripple. I don't know. I can't explain it the way that I'm not doing it justice. But it was something I'd never seen before, and it gave the show a completely different look. That's one thing that caught my eye. And then I gotta give you some props. If you haven't already, go check the staff predictions article before the season. In one of our categories or prompts, it was, what would you like to see this season? And I wrote, and I quote, I have it right here, I would love to see more groups incorporate Alan Stone and Stephen Day music in their arrangements. Day's songs such as If You Were the Rain, On Top of the World, and Dancing in the Street. When they did Dancing in the Street, no kidding you, I paused it because I heard the first note. And I was like, there's no way that they're doing this song right now. There's absolutely no way that this is happening. And after that happened, I literally took no more notes because I couldn't take any more notes because my eyes were glued to the screen. Linn-Mar blew me away. And they've been doing that for a few years now. So I know they're not going to any crazy national competitions. I know we talked about this last week. But if not, I can probably see this group going undefeated. And it's so cool, especially because it's week 1. So if they're starting here at week 1, I cannot imagine where they'll be by the end of their season. So.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. Moral of the story, if you haven't watched the Linn-Mar video yet, go and watch it. I don't know who uploaded it. Is it another Matt Warfield video? Or is it?
Yes? I don't know. I don't have it pulled up.
Okay.
But I think it's Matt something.
Yeah, Matt Warfield usually posts all the Iowa, so go find that. I also saw we had a comment about the lighting cues in 10th Street's show. Just something that I want to pitch in, not in 10th Street at all. You know, Trent Buglewitz is one of the most creative minds in show choir out there. I think, especially outside of California, but even within California, I think he's right up there with John and everybody else who you talk about in that big show design category. And so I think it would be a little bit of a disappointment if Linn-Mar wasn't perfect on all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say yes. Love Waukee North, Linn-Mar's lighting and production and everything like that. The other, I just wanted to touch pretty quick here. Obviously, Waukee Northwest, they may be overlooked a little bit by just how grand 10th Street show is. I think they're going to have a great season here as well. It's a little bit of a different look from where they were last year, stylistically. I only saw a bit of their show, but it's a look for them, but I think it's a good look for them as well. And something unique that Linn-Mar did is they not only swept the varsity division, but they also swept the entire their girls group style won the women's, and their prep group in step won the prep division and was finals. So a rare week for Linn-Mar.
Huge. And I mean, that's kind of how I thought that competition would stack up. We'll get into it, but I'm excited to see how Waukee Northwest responds in their next competition when we talk about that coming up. But yeah, I thought it was a great competition overall. Shout out to the 2 prep groups who made finals. That's always fun. Yeah, are we good to go on to the next?
Absolutely. So we are going to talk about the Des Moines Christian Illumination Competition. This one, we go from talking about Waukee Northwest, talking about the OG, the original Waukee. They claimed grand championship along with best crew, best band, best choreography, and best female soloist, followed by Indianola, Marion, Paso, Gridley, Cedar Rapids, and Xavier. This one was the competition of the weekend that did not have a stream, so I don't know how much people are going to do things at all. I'm just going to start off here with a couple points. I think number 1, Indianola had a director change coming into this year. Their old varsity director left, and Miles, who directed the prep group for 5 years, is now the varsity director. This is an incredibly emphatic start. If you think back to last year, Indianola was on the losing end to Marion in a split caption decision at this competition. So Indianola, with director change already coming in from where they were last year. Another thing, a little bit farther down the result lineup, Cedar coming in 5th and Xavier coming in 6th. Those 2 groups flip-flopped at the end of the last year. So Cedar Rapids, Jefferson experiencing some growth as well. Don't know if I have anything to add there.
I mean, no. I mean, we were so glued to the other 2 competitions. But again, this one's definitely not slept on at all. Waukee, of course, from Iowa. it's going to be cool to see how, because I believe other Iowa groups are going next week. So it's going to be super cool to see how they all stack up together. I can't wait to see Waukee show. I'm always entertained by their shows. Big shout out to El Paso going into a different state and receiving a top 4 placement. Not always easy to do, especially going into Iowa with all their different rules. So big shout out to them. Yeah, that's all I have on this competition.
Nathan, you got anything to pitch in?
Nope.
All right, yeah. I just want to say that is a good point about El Paso Gridley. You know, you also had out-of-state groups with Omaha Skutt, also going. Neither of them qualified for the finals. So
Yep.
that is something where you look at El Paso and you say, okay, that's the only group that came into Iowa and it made it to the evening round. So we're going to move on to the final competition here of the week, which is the Holmen. The results of this, Waukee Power Company winning grand championship along with best choreography, best closer. The Onalaska Hilltoppers take first runner-up along with winner Cedar Rapids, Washington, third place with best ballad. Sauk Prairie Executive Session, fourth place. Sparta Upstage Adrenaline, fifth place, and Reedsburg Core, sixth place. What shows did you guys see on the live stream, and what do you guys think?
Nathan, you can go first.
No, you should go first.
Well, I wasn't able to catch many of it. I saw a lot of clips on social media, which are awesome. Thank you to all the groups who like take social media like that serious, especially if you do have a live stream or even if you don't, because it's super cool to see little tad bits of shows all across. So I mean, well, you're the one who was there, and I'm not. I mean, you saw every show, and big shout out to you for the emergency press conference. When I saw that come up, I was like, okay. I was like, Will's deep diving into this. So I have more questions for you because you're the one who's there, and I know you're going to go over it. So the matchup between Onalaska and Waconia, I know I heard some of what you said during your emergency press conference, but was it closer than you would have thought, or was it a little bigger of a gap, do you think?
You know, I don't really think that I had an expectation coming in. I think that if anything, it was a little bit wider than I expected it to be. I thought that Onalaska was like just a touch off improved. There's just something for the first half of their show that didn't really click for me. I don't know if it was just the first competition jitters or what. It was very clear that Waconia came in with a well-rehearsed show and a show that was buttoned down to the T, and then finals, they found that extra 10% that you didn't think was going to be there. And so to me, it was very clear that Waconia was last in this competition. It was wider than I thought it was going to be. Coming in, I thought that 1 and 2 were close and 3 and 4 were going to be close. Turned out that 1 was a little bit ahead and then 2 and 3 were really close. I think 5 were pretty close. So that definitely changed my expectations a little bit. The most telling thing about this competition, to me at least, is that Waconia was assessed penalty in prelims, still was the number one group heading into finals, and then obviously with no time penalties in finals was the number one group again, right? And it went 53 seconds over, which equated to the smallest time penalty out on the day. But they had by far the most set work of anybody there, right? And the fact that, yes, they went over, but they were over by less than a minute. When some groups with no props, just and were over by minutes. I mean, I think it's a big testament to how Aaron Olson runs his program there and how much responsibility these kids take on, that they load in, and of course they have plenty of dads helping them too. They load in, they up, they run their show, they get out, and they're not the culprit for running terribly behind schedule. So that was the biggest thing to me. It was my first time seeing any of the Rapids proper schools, so either Washington, Cedar Rapids, Jefferson, or Cedar Rapids. I thoroughly enjoyed my time watching them both perform prelims and in the final. Their ballad just has a choral depth that is so rarely achieved in Wisconsin. It just had this rich, mature blend. And y'all, it has been so long. Mike Weaver choreographed. It's been way too long. And so they said choreographed by Mike Weaver, and I'm like, I forgot he existed. Like, he existed. So that was a real treat as well. Sauk Prairie was really tight for the start of the season as well. they're probably the last group on this list that a lot of people know about. So I'll kind of wrap up my comment there. But yeah, it was a great competition. I watched 21 scoring groups plus 6 finalists. So that's 29. So yeah, it was a long, full day, and I was really happy to be there.
Yeah. Nathan, do you have anything to say?
Just like I usually let the person there do a lot of the talking because you never can really precisely get the feel, especially for a lot of vocal elements, because you kind of have to have audio at like perfection to hear all those vocal elements, and a lot of the mixing, a lot of the blending you cannot hear, unfortunately, on live streams. So that's why I'm looking forward to actually going to competitions later in the season to actually hear those vocal elements, hear that power, and I'm sure that's what Will heard on Saturday. Did you hear a lot of that, a lot of big vocals from these top groups? Because I was watching Waukee, and they had a lot of good lighting, a lot of good costuming. I really liked their big opening. It reminded me a lot of Brownsburg all-girls group last year with the big, was it the big cloth and then the reveal underneath?
Yep. His globe opening, the globe dress number, I think will go down as one of like the numbers in Minnesota show choir. You know, you have like your old race numbers that everybody loves, and you have your Hastings numbers that everybody loves. I think that Waconia's globe dress is going to go down in Minnesota show choir as one of like the numbers. So I would agree with you there, Nathan, that it was a fantastic thing to watch. One thing that Waukee did have going against them, as we touched on a little bit earlier, is time penalties. And so Holmen did enforce their time penalties at a 25-minute time limit per group. And so the penalty was 15 points per minute. And I'd seen a little bit of chatter about this just in the immediate aftermath of Holmen about should there be time penalties? Should there be time recommendations? Do time limits even fit in with the spirit of show choir? So I'm going to toss this to the people who were sitting in an auditorium all day, back of time, who actually had things to do and other than watch groups. So I guess number one, should time penalties exist? And then number two, if they don't fit the spirit of show choir and they shouldn't exist, what would?
Well, I'm not totally against time penalties, I don't think. I feel like they should all be reasonable to a certain extent, but I do know that like time penalties scare groups away from certain competitions, and that kind of ruins the the battles that you might get. I know swing stations used to go up to Wisconsin all the time. I believe they always would go to on Alaska for the first competition of the year. A few time penalties they received, and then I don't think they've gone since. I see the thing is though is as long as it's fair for every single group, if every single group gets the same amount of time to set up the stage and run their show, I really don't think there's a problem with it. But I don't know much about like the whole points and how. I know I went to competitions and it was like a point per second, which seems crazy to me. But I mean, competitions have to do what they got to do. No one wants to leave a competition at 2 a.m, which some of us have had to do before because there is no time penalty. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on time penalties.
Yeah, I also agree. I think time penalties, we'll have this discussion every year because it seems like it's just going to stay at this point. But I believe time penalties should remain a critical part of show choir. It's a big part, especially with live streams, as you mentioned, that you don't have these huge delays between groups that'll reduce engagement. In the actual auditorium, you might have a lot more conversations that you can do, and you also need to move maybe some of the groups that are, or the families that are watching a specific group, maybe to a different section, and there's always all this movement that's happening, so it's kind of okay to have that extra time a little bit, but you kind of want to keep it moving in a sense, like you said. We don't want to leave at 2 a.m. I had one of those experiences as well, and then if you're or the big thing also with going till 2 a.m. is that you have groups performing at 1:15, 1:30 a.m. and you're not going to get the best out of a group that's performing at 1 a.m. It really limits that. But I also see like it will limit certain groups going to certain places, and it will limit creativity because there's sometimes a lot of creativity in these longer shows. Like you see California groups, sometimes they go up to like 22 minutes of the actual show, which would probably be a time penalty in a Midwest show choir competition, where they're trying to keep like 25-minute or 30-minute slots. So it does limit some creativity, but I think overall, especially for Midwest, we'll still be seeing time penalties, and I agree to have them enforced.
I would generally fall in line with both of you here. I definitely do see both sides of it because on the one hand, if you are a large pro, you have these elaborate set designs, and you have, a band that numbers in the upper teens, and you're bringing in and amps and big horns and everything like that. I understand that, right? But on the flip side, one of the oldest requires that, we're not teaching kids how to sing and dance. We're teaching kids how to be life. And part of being successful in life is being disciplined, right? And I think that time penalties fall into that category. It's, to me, it's sort of the same concept of not talking during breaks at rehearsal, right? You get what you get in terms of the time you're given. And then it's up to you to simply just make the most of that time. And so at Holmen, the time penalty was 15 minutes per full minute. So if you went 0 to 1 minutes over, it was 15 points, and then 0 to 2 or 1 to 2 minutes, 30 points, and then we had one group in the 3 minutes over bracket, and so that was 45 points. I believe that was on a 100-point day score sheet. So, I mean, 1 minute, that's 15 out of 600. So I think that's like 2.5. So I think like 1 minute over, like it wasn't terrible. But once you start getting above 1 minute, that's where you start finding trouble. And if you look at Nina, I actually had Nina as my 6th place group at Holmen before anything like that. And then Nina's 11th, and I was shocked. I was like, "There's no way Nina's 11th." They were definitely better than some other shows I saw that one ahead of them. And sure enough, you look, and Nina got a 2-minute time penalty. And so I don't know if that was due to their set being a little bit long, or just due to some first competition jitters or anything like that. But it's just the things that sometimes you may not see, but that do impact show choir. So I would say that I do also I would favor enforcing time penalties. I think that they are another educational component to choir. It's not arts related, but it is there. And I never had any of those nightmare 2 a.m. conferences. I think the latest my group ever left a comp was like 12. That's because we couldn't get our stuff together as a group. Like finals like an hour before, and we were literally the last group out of the competition. So that was fun, and I thankfully never did that again. But I'm sure we're gonna have this talk sometime later on in the season, right? But since it was a kind of visible thing, number one with getting a time penalty in prelims and still being ahead of the field, and then also a time penalty potentially knocking a group from finals, you don't know for sure until you see the exact numbers. But Nina probably would have been about in that range. Just wanted to cover right up front here on the pod. But we're going to look forward now to the next set of competitions. And so last week, only 3 competitions. Cover them all. This week, there are, I think, close to 10 competitions nationwide. So we're not going to be able to cover them all. If you were a fan of this outlet back in the Barstool Show Choir days, you'll know that one of our longest running columns is Competition of the Week. And so Competition of the Week is returning for its 3rd season. And we had competitions of the week last week and a competition recap column posted just this afternoon. So head over to homeroomshowchoir.com and check out competitions of the week recap for the past week. But we are going to all give our thoughts on what will eventually be this week's competitions of the week. There are 4 of these, and so we are going to go to the Cornhusker State to start, and we're going to Gretna Primetime. This one is the kickoff to the Nebraska season because Papillion La Vista South moved their competition first weekend of January to the first weekend of February this year. So in this field, we have Johnston Innovation from Iowa, and then Papillion La Vista South Titanium, Lincoln Southwest Resident, Millard North. I didn't write the group name down. I think Infinity, yep, because Intensity is their prep group, Grand Island Ultimate Image, and Elkhorn South Blackout. And then In the women's division, we have most of these schools in Southwest plus Omaha, Maryland. And in the prep division, all 6 schools are bringing a prep group. Plus, we have Millard West's swing prep group, the Swing Cats. So the reason that I wanted to bring this up is that there aren't a ton of groups here, but if you look at groups, there are a handful of groups, I think 3 in particular, that even fans of non-Nebraska show choir will recognize. Even your bottom 3 groups in the varsity division are very solid Nebraska groups. We have 4 of these that won competition last year. Johnston went undefeated. Papillion South had a pair of wins last year. Lincoln Southwest had wins, and Elkhorn South through one last year. And so while there may be a pretty defined cut, there are 6 varsity groups in the final spot. Just want to hear people's thoughts on where people are going to line up. This is everybody's first competition of the year.
Yeah. It's exciting for Nebraska to start get going. I'm really excited to see how it goes. It's an early test for all these choirs, but of course all eyes are going to be on Johnson, especially after seeing how Linn-Mar did this past weekend. I know my eyes will be on that, but like Nebraska choirs like Pop South, Grand Island, Lincoln Southwest, I mean, that 2 through 6 range is going to be quite a battle. And even one of these groups can always, nab Johnson because, it's first comp for everyone. Usually first weekends, you see some crazy stuff happen. But you mentioned it, Will. Probably the most exciting thing I'm looking forward to is the prep division because all these groups I know have their hand in the cookie jar for this title. Like, for example, you mentioned Johnson Synergy, the Millard West Swing Cats. I wish Millard West was at this competition because that would make things a little more interesting. But, of course, I'm so glad that Millard West Swing Cats is going to be there. Lincoln Southwest, I know they win a bunch. It's going to be really cool to see how that division turns out.
Absolutely. Nathan, you got any thoughts, or are you just excited to see this one play out?
Well, I am excited to see this one play out, but just looking through all the events, when I was looking through this, I was like, oh shoot, Gretna has a huge lineup. You have Johnston coming in here from Iowa, and like many had them as one of their top 10 shows last year. I'd probably have them about that range too. And they're coming in, like you said, this is their first competition of the year. Are they prepared? Are they prepared like Linn-Mar was last week? Linn-Mar showed that they met that standard first week of January. They're prepared. They're set. That's Iowa Show Choir for you. And will Johnston do the same? Like you also mentioned, this is more of a Nebraska opening weekend. But will Johnston steal the show and come in and take these spots? And I think they definitely are going to be the ones that are favored, but like you said, there's a lot of other good groups like Papillion La Vista with Titanham, and then I also recognize Millard North and Lincoln Southwest. Like even for me as an Indiana show choir, these are some bigger high school names, and they're all coming at the same competition.
I'm going to be bold here, and I'm going to say that the only group that has even an outside shot at toppling Johnston is Papio South.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see a way that Johnston goes from undefeated pretty much every major caption last year to losing to multiple of these. I just don't see it happening. I think Papillion La Vista South is really the only group that historically has enough of a record that could even challenge Johnston. I fully expect Johnston to complete this competition. I think Papio South is the only one that'll give a run for the money. I think 1 and 2 are probably going to be maybe not head and shoulders above the field, but for sure perhaps 4 heads above the field if we're still going with that analogy. Lincoln Southwest is a very interesting case. They were top show choir in Lincoln, Nebraska last year. That title belonged to Lincoln East, who beat Southwest multiple times. And Lincoln East doesn't travel as much. They're not as well known of a group nationally. And so Lincoln Southwest, I think, probably in the back of their heads, they're thinking we want to be the top choir in the city this year. But Gretna is in the Omaha area. It's an area. And so you kind of got to set that aside. I think them and Millard North are going to be very close. I saw Lincoln Southwest at UNL last year, Millard North last year, and I thought that they were pretty similar shows. I think I maybe would have given the edge to Millard North there, but I think that that's going to be a very competitive 3 and 4 matchup. And then I'm not going to discount the 5 and the 6 matchup too with Elkhorn South Island. Elkhorn is just a very, very interesting district year in and year out. between Elkhorn North, and Elkhorn South. It seems like at least one of the three is always having a good season between Elkhorn Excel, Elkhorn North Encore, and then Elkhorn South Blackout. And Elkhorn South did break into the win column last year. It'll be interesting to see if they can do that again this year. Grand Island, coming from the central part of Nebraska. Ultimate Image is one of the more storied programs in Nebraska. And so while I think they had the best of seasons last year, I think that just the history of that program leads it, and they're capable of popping off at any given time. I will try my absolute best to make it to this competition. We'll be in the area for some stuff. And so my goal is to catch the daytime round at Gretna. So, or perhaps the finals round, either one, or probably not going to be able to make it for the full day. But absolutely need to catch Johnston, Papio South, Lincoln Southwest, Millard North, all of these varsity groups.
Yeah, Wisconsin Show Choir download on the road. I like this.
Yeah,
I like this.
Just, and I'm obviously not going to be there for the show choir, but
yes,
it was in the area, and I'm like, that lineup snuck up on me.
And Will, you were right. I think you hit it on the head with Pop South. They've done it before. They've nipped some people in the butt before. I know they go to Troy some years every now and then, and they beat those Illinois groups and Missouri groups all the time. They just sneak up on you. So, although this should probably be a comfortable win for Johnson, Pop South is right behind them.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap that, and we're going to move on to our next competition of the week, which is Waukee Starstruck. And we talked about Waukee and Waukee Northwest in our review segment of this podcast. So Waukee's hosting, and Waukee Northwest is going to this competition. And who is Waukee Northwest going to square off against? From Iowa, they're going to West Des Moines, Indianola, Norwalk, Southeast Polk, Iowa City Liberty, Dallas Grimes. From Illinois, they're going to have Glenwood Tech Beaver, and from Missouri, Maryville Spec. So thoughts, opinions, concerns from my coach?
Well, like I said earlier in the podcast, how is Waukee Northwest going to respond? I think that they're going to have an edge up maybe at this competition because they've already performed before. But of course, like I've said millions of times before, it's no cakewalk. Valley is a very strong group. I think they have a real shot at this to knock maybe Waukee Northwest down one more peg. But then you also have Norwalk, who has never slept on, and Indianola, who they're always very solid. I forgot where they went last year. I think it was Heart of America, Kansas City, either last year or 2 years ago, and they shocked me from where they placed. I think they placed maybe top 3 or so. I don't know. I need someone to check that for me. I could be totally wrong. But again, this is going to be a really exciting competition. And as an Illinois guy, of course, Glenwood, I wrote about this in the preview article. What is there going to be identity this season? There's no more Guimars within the program anymore. And they've added last season a middle school feeder program. And they also added a prep group, which is huge moves for Glenwood. It'll be exciting where they place. But, but if Waukee, it's going to be a big bounce back week for Waukee, I believe.
Yeah, and I think this should be a good competition, though. Again, it's another competition where you're getting a lot of traveling schools from around the area, like not even close to the area as much, just across the Midwest. But I would have Waukee Northwest likely to win this one. As you mentioned, Glenwood, Titan Fever, can't rule them out. I would say, like I said, Waukee Northwest should win this competition, but I think Glenwood, they usually have a lot of good placements in competitions like this, so I would have them at second or third. And that's overall what I think for this competition.
Yeah, Ethan, I hate to contradict you here, but I just see still some question marks with Glenwood. I think they had a little bit of a slow start last year, especially when they went up to Wisconsin and they competed at Milton. I don't know if they wound up where a lot of people would have had them pegged. So Glenwood, to me, just has a couple too many question marks for me to put them seriously in consideration for the win here. I think Valley and Waukee Northwest are going to be the two groups that are in the conversation for the win here. Indianola, I think, should be right there with Glenwood. Indianola as we've seen, they're already better than last year. So I think that they will probably factor into the discussion for the top. They don't wind up there. The other thing is that we talked about this with Des Moines Christian, but there's just such a glob of Iowa, like if we're going on like tier, A tier, like kind of like low A tier, high B tier Flyers. You've got Indianola, Norwalk, Southeast Polk, and Liberty, who, if you take out the three groups, Waukee, Northwest, Valley, and Glenwood, you've got four of the really elite next tier down groups going for 3 final spots. And so it's really going to be interesting to see. Norwalk ran a really hard competition schedule last year, and a ton of placements that pop off the page. That's because they were going up against really spectacular choirs. Southeast Polk has been making waves as of late. Iowa City Liberty, this program really started in the mid to late 2010s. So on the scale of things, they're still really young, but they've done a lot of great things so far in their young existence. And then kind of rounding out the group, Dallas Center Grimes is talked about a little bit last week. I think it will be a little bit of an uphill battle for them to make finals again this week, but it's great to see them going from the really loaded Des Moines Christian to the really loaded Waukee. And so props to them for running such a crowded competition schedule this early.
You love choirs that run the gauntlet, that they go up against tough groups because they want to get better, they want to see where they're at. Of course, groups will always go to their, quote unquote free wins. Some would say go to a comp that not many big names will be at, but it's always cool to see groups try to run the gauntlet for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are going to go from Nebraska to Iowa, and we're going to keep making our way north a little bit. We are going to go to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to the Sioux Falls Jefferson Cavalier Classic. And so this mixed division lineup is one of the more varied that we'll see. This one includes from Minnesota, Waconia, Hastings, and also St. Francis. From Iowa, we have Lewis Central. And then from South Dakota, we have Aberdeen Central, plus the 3 other main Sioux Falls groups: Sioux Falls Washington, Sioux Falls Roosevelt, and Sioux Falls Holmen. So really, to me, this one is very interesting because Sioux Falls Jefferson, new school, new program, new competition, all the boxes. And I will admit, a little ticked off at them naming their competition the Cavalier Classic right away, because I'm like, you can't be a classic if you haven't been around for like 5 to 6 years,
You're not wrong.
They draw in fantastic choirs, not just from South Dakota, but from Minnesota and Iowa and all these other places as well. And so I'm like, okay, I'll cut you a break on naming your competition the Classic right away. But there are just so many storylines here. I'll probably clean up my thoughts about them at the end. But what do you guys think about what's going to happen here?
Of course, right away you look at the names that jump off the boards. You got Hastings, who had an incredible year last year, and I mean they usually do. But of course, Waconia, like this is almost a bigger test than last week, I believe. And Will, you know that you saw their show. You know what they are capable of and how far they can go in a week. But if they can pull off this one, then you start hearing a lot of chatter, I believe, throughout show choir and all that stuff. They could be the breakout group of the year if they can pull off this one over Hastings, especially being in the north and beating some very top tier groups in the north. Again, Hastings, though, I think they might top the cake here, especially I believe this is like their 4th or 5th season under Ellie Jordan, and I think she's done a wonderful job with them. For groups that always surprise me are Lewis Central, O'Gorman, and St. Francis is kind of intriguing this year. I know Will mentioned it to me earlier that they have a whole new creative team, and I feel like they're always right there on the step to be one of those great groups, to always being consistent. Yeah, I'm excited to hear your guys' thoughts on the competition.
Yeah, this will be another good competition, kind of the opening for South Dakota this year, and they always have some interesting groups. They feel like sometimes they have a different take of show choir, some of the other Midwest groups, but generally still similar Midwest vibes. However, I think this will be a showdown between Waconia and Hastings. Once again, 2 Minnesota groups going to Sioux Falls to take this down. And you have to look at last year, like you mentioned. Hastings had a great year. However, Waconia bested them in a competition at January 28th, Bloomington Kennedy, where they took home best choreo while Hastings took best vocals. So once again, Waconia kind of has this. They bested them last year, so it could be the potential again. And I saw Waconia's show this past week, and I would say I was very excited about Waconia, and I think they could definitely pull it off. Like you said, you thought Hastings might be able to overall beat in a close competition. This could be a split caption one where both groups are so close, but I would have Waconia have the edge in this one.
Yeah, and obviously, both of you guys touched on it. It's hilarious that a competition in Sioux Falls winds up back to a Minnesota State Championship this year, right? And some people might throw Bloomington Kennedy in that conversation, and that's okay, right? But ultimately, this is between the top two groups in Minnesota. But I also want to give some love to the local South Dakota groups that are there. It seems like South Dakota has a different top group. For a while it was Falls Roosevelt that was on top of the pot state. Then all of a sudden, the past couple of years, especially post-pandemic, Aberdeen Central has kind of been the top group in the state. And so you can't count out Sioux Falls, Washington. I think they've been a little bit step behind in years, but very storied program as well. And then O'Gorman, really kind of a revelation last year. They picked up Kevin Chase as their choreographer. Their program had gone through a little turmoil, but they are well on their way to going back to where they were as one of the top South Dakota groups right around 2010 or so, and that's reaching way in the back. But a couple other things I just want to touch on here to wrap up talking about competition. Number one, Ethan, you briefly touched on Lewis. I think they are perhaps the most interesting group outside of the top two in this competition. Kevin Palu has got on an upward swing literally every single year he's been. Can they continue that upward swing? That question is going to start to be answered, at least at this competition. And then the last thing that I saw that was very unique to the show choir world is an inclusive division. So this is a show choir for all ability levels that I really want to give a shout out to Sioux Falls for doing. So this one features choirs from Sioux Falls Roosevelt, Sioux Falls Lincoln, and Sioux Falls Jefferson. So it's really neat to see them expanding the show choir community. And obviously they're not going for placements or anything, but just giving those students who may not have an opportunity to do quote unquote traditional show choir, an opportunity to do show choir along with students from the other show choir groups at those schools. I thought was a really touching thing and something that I could definitely do to see more of throughout the show choir community. So we're going to move on to our last competition of the week. And so we are headed back to Iowa here, and we are going to talk about the Linn-Mar Super. And so Linn-Mar was at Ankeny Centennial's competition last week. AC will return the favor this weekend, and they will go up against an absolutely stacked field featuring some of Iowa. Urbandale, Cedar Rapids Prairie, Cedar Rapids Kennedy, Cedar Rapids Washington, Cedar Rapids Jefferson, Iowa City High, Western Dubuque, and then Omaha South crashing the party from Nebraska as well. Folks, we talked about it a couple of times before. We promised we're going to get away from it at some point this season. We're not just going to talk about Iowa half of the podcast every year. But Iowa is one of the, I think, of the three main circuits of Ohio and Iowa. Iowa's the one that starts the earliest. Perhaps Iowa's the one that finished the latest, so we'll give everyone their due sharing a little bit here. But just another completely loaded field. I'll put this one last because personally, I think that this is a little bit of a field than Waukee. Waukee had a lot of low A tier, high B tier groups. Linn-Mar has a lot of S tier / high A tier groups. So in like Iowa's S tier, obviously you have to put Ankeny Centennial there. I would put Urbandale there as well. I would put Cedar Rapids Prairie there as well, and then Cedar Rapids Washington there as well. So that's 4 right away. And then in that very, very high A tier, I would put the other 2 Cedar Rapids schools, Washington and as well as Omaha South. Iowa City may be a step under that, but still probably in the A or maybe high B tier of Iowa show choir. Western Dubuque probably not going to be a super huge factor here, but there are so many different this competition would go. Love to hear what you guys are thinking.
No, I think you hit it on the head again, Will. There's a reason why Iowa does so well at national competitions. It's because they run through gauntlets like this. Same thing goes for Indiana. Nathan, you know. No, yeah, but I'm excited to see like Urbandale. Urbandale shows are always so elaborate, and I always think they do a great job with their choir. Cedar Rapids Kennedy is also very interesting. I know back in the day that they would always be a huge choir to keep your eyes on, and they still are. Where they place is going to be really, really interesting to see. It's also cool to see Ankeny's. I believe that's the prep group. I believe it's renamed.
Yep.
Yeah, it's cool to see them in there. Omaha South, they're always running or giving you a run for your money for finals. But I think the group that I'm most interested to see besides Urbandale might be Prairie, because if Prairie can start off hot, that's dangerous for the rest of that region, because I think Prairie always has the potential to sneak up on you. I know I've said this multiple times throughout this show that there's many groups that can sneak up on you, but Prairie might be the group, I think, that can always swap a placement with a group and you would not expect it. So if you see them maybe even like placing like top 3 at this comp, I think that's their limit, maybe top 3. But Prairie is a group that I'm going to keep my eyes on because the Ambassadors always put on a good show. And like I said, it's week 1 for them, so anything can happen.
Yeah, definitely Prairie is one to keep your eyes on, maybe 3rd, 4th range-ish. This is quite the lineup, as you mentioned before. A total of 10 groups, a lot of them around the Cedar Rapids area, kind of like an Iowa state championship, as you mentioned, the Minnesota state championship taking place in Sioux Falls, but you are missing Johnston. But from when you have a top group like Linn-Mar hosting competition, you can usually bring in a lot of these good groups, and I'm really excited to see this competition as well. As you mentioned, Ankeny Centennial coming off a loss to Linn-Mar in their last competition. Or wait, did they come with a loss? That was right. Or did they host? They hosted last week.
They hosted last week, yep.
So this is their first week. They got to show off their show. I think I did see some of it. Yeah, they were the last group. They got to show off their show, which is always really fun. And now they're the last ones to perform in the mixed division itself. So I think they definitely will be one of those top groups. I think I would have. It's tough. I like Ankeny Centennial, but as you mentioned, Urbandale is also really, really good. So I have no clue. So I will yield to Will here.
Great. Well, it looks like I'm just going to be the opinion guy on this show. I guess you need that. So great. I'm going to come down with the opinions here. I'm going to say that Prairie is going to be a top 2 group at this competition. Write it down. Put it in the book. Prairie's
Love that.
Huge.
Love that.
I would not say
the
that, but yeah.
the interesting part about this competition is that Urbandale beat Ankeny Centennial at Johnston last year in their head-to-head. So if you purely look at 2023, Urbandale has the edge. But also, Ankeny Centennial was one of the first groups that we talked about when we said director changes. And so Carolyn Edgerton is now at the helm of Ankeny Centennial. Now we are here at the Linn-Mar Supernova, and Ankeny Centennial gets its first real test of the season, right? Because obviously you can get the critique at your own competition. But here at Linn-Mar, and Supernova has this great history of pretty much only attracting top-tier Iowa groups, right? You have a test that is so far deep that, honestly, I could see Ankeny Centennial winning this competition, right? I could also see Ankeny Centennial taking 4th in this competition, because I think that if there is any turmoil whatsoever with the director change, Urbandale Prairie, and Cedar Rapids Kennedy are all right. I would put Urbandale probably as 1, and I would put Prairie as 1B, and I would put Cedar Rapids Kennedy as 2A in that discussion. So I could see Ankeny Centennial falling to 4th. And so that's why every podcast needs an opinion guy. The other good thing for me is that this is the Cedar Rapids City Championship. You have the 3 public high schools in Cedar Rapids all duking out. I would expect to see the placements come in as Kennedy on top, then Washington, Jefferson. Although I would be happy to see that change. Jefferson is the one that's lagging a little bit here. Washington is closer to Kennedy than to Jefferson. Other than that, I think that you have 5 groups that are for sure going to qualify for AC, Urbandale, Prairie, Cedar Rapids Kennedy, and Cedar Rapids Wash. The real fight is going to be for the 6th spot. I have Cedar Rapids Jefferson, Omaha, and Iowa City all in that discussion. I think Jefferson for sure is a step ahead of Iowa City, perhaps Omaha South as well, although I wouldn't be surprised to see any of those three groups take that sixth finalist spot. If I had to pick someone to win, I think that I would pick Urbandale, just because if you look at the momentum behind the Urbandale program, they have long had a women's group. They picked up a mixed prep group for this year too, so they have now entered three-choir juggernaut land, which is rare outside of Iowa, but they have now gotten to that point in Iowa. So I would pick Urbandale here. After that,
really bold decision there,
Yep.
picking Urbandale.
Yep. 2, 3, 4, throw my hands up, but I'll pick Urbandale to win.
Yeah. One thing that catches my eye is how early in the day Urbandale's going, because you could expect them to set the bar at 150 or whenever they're supposed to go. But then all these other groups have to try to catch up to Urbandale, is from how I see it. And with Prairie and Ankeny going in the last two slots of prelims, will they be able to catch up to that bar that Urbandale set? And, throughout the day, judges feel different emotions. They see all these shows throughout a day. It gets tiring. Maybe they're tired of seeing the same old, same old. Maybe they want something that jumps off the page. And it just depends if Prairie and Ankeny, Centennial can jump off the page and catch up to Urbandale, I believe.
Yeah. So that'll wrap it up for our competitions of the week segment. However, there are plenty more competitions that are going on. So I just want to give both of you a little quick moment here to shout out a competition that we didn't cover in depth that you're still excited to see this weekend.
Nathan, you can go ahead with this one.
Yep. So one of the ones I'm excited for, the first major Ohio Valley competition, Beaver Creek, is starting. They always have incredible competitions. This year, Noblesville is starting their year early in Indianapolis school and heading over to Beaver Creek, so that'll be exciting. They'll be facing Loveland, who is a top Ohio group, as well as Hurricane, who's making the 3-hour trip from West Virginia, which they do a lot of traveling. It feels like they're more of an Ohio school than a West Virginia school. A lot of those West Virginia schools like to do a lot of traveling, and they are doing it once again in Beaver Creek. If you look down, they have a stacked Tier 2 division as well. A lot of schools from Indiana as well as Ohio coming in. And overall, Beaver Creek will be exciting. We will likely have a recap of that next week on homeroomshowchoir.com, and I think they have a live stream usually for Beaver Creek. So hopefully, has been and will remain free of charge. So that'll be where I will be on Saturday. Beaver Creek live stream.
I'll probably find you there, Nathan. One other one that my eyes kept on is Louisville City. The East Coast is ramping up here a little bit. Basically, you have all your top East Coast groups there, besides maybe if you wanted to throw Shepherd Hill in there, maybe you do so. But Daniel Hand, Vibe, who had an amazing season last year, Andover, they're always a tough group. Waltham, this will probably be a Waltham Vibe top marquee matchup, and this might set the tone for how the East Coast is going this year. So keep your eyes out for Lowell City Show Choir Festival.
Yeah, a big thing with Massachusetts is they usually have like just one competition a week for all of Massachusetts. So it's like they're going at each other over and over and over again, and that I think definitely probably brings the best out of them. I've seen a lot of great shows from Daniel Hand when they move up to the nationals level, and I'm excited to see which one of those groups has it this year. They usually trade off, which means that they're really close. It usually comes down to what the individual group is that year. So I will definitely be keeping an eye on that on showchoir.com.
Yep, I think that you guys have a great analysis. With Lowell, I think you're missing South Windsor, Coral Spectrum, which I would expect to be one of the major players in New England this year. But other than that, you've got your primetime Waltham versus Daniel Hand matchup. And so that obviously is spectacular. It's my own question, and I'm just going to have to punt on this. I'm probably going to say this every week, but there's just so much show choir that I'm excited about. Onalaska in Wisconsin, got to shout that out as my home state. But then also Blue Valley, which is the only Kansas competition here, is happening this weekend. We've also got Muscatine in Iowa, which is playing third fiddle in Iowa, but is still really competitive. I myself am going to try to do the show choir double. I'm going to head to the daytime round at Gretna, and then the finals round at Lincoln Links, perhaps vice versa. But I'm going to try and pull the Nebraska double for this weekend. Don't know how it'll go, but the goal is just as many choirs as I've never seen before. So I am specifically excited for those. But that just about wraps it up. Thank you to everybody who has stuck it out through this episode number 2 of Show Choir Nation. We're going to be here every Monday throughout the season at 7 Eastern, 6 Central, or 4 Pacific. If we've got any California people lounging around in here early season. It is also on Spotify and YouTube, so just search Homeroom Show Choir there for this in a full-size video format and rewatch this on Instagram's media player. We are also in more content brings with more circuits going on showchoir.com this week. We just posted a competitions of the week recap for this past week. We have a Beaver Creek preview in the works from Ohio staff writer Simon Zimmerman, and we've got more content coming in the miscellaneous as well. And then we covered 4 competitions of the week today that will be covered in our written competitions of the week piece, but we are introducing a wildcard competition of the week poll to decide our last official comp of the week. That will be going live tomorrow. So vote early and vote often, as Instagram allows you to. It'll be posted on X as well. So Nathan or Ethan, any closing thoughts?
The only thing I gotta say is thank you guys for tuning in. And if you cannot find our podcast anywhere, just go to the Show Choir homepage now. Shout out to showchoir.com for putting us on there. We really do appreciate it. You can also find Will's other podcasts in there, the Wisconsin Show Choir download. We are Show Choir Nation, and thank you guys for tuning in. Nathan, if you have anything,
again,
feel free to say.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for all the positive comments. And if you have any suggestions as well for the podcast or for other content you want to see, definitely reach out to us on our account or to the homeroom account. We're still accepting contributors as well, especially now that we're having more circuits start on. A little crazy to see California people around just yet. Season's going to be a little while away, but I'm excited to see all the circuits start up and excited to continue this podcast next week.
Yeah, final shout out to Hawken with choir.com for putting our podcast, all the Show Choir podcasts on the main page. So, our friend of the show, Bradley Davis, and his Southern Shows podcast, go check that out as well. And then Ren Millick and her Midwest Sound podcast, which, we're pretty much a Midwest podcast at this point. We will be less once the South and New England and California starts going on, but that's specifically Midwest focus as well. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you tomorrow with our Top of the Week poll, and we will see you next week on Show Choir Nation. Have a great night, y'all.
Bye, guys.
Bye.